or telling us about the future is of no.
Yes.
Choosing somebody who's useless cannot even lead him to the future. Now, we read actually on 68, which is cancelled for the church,
Okay.
elaborating on the verse which is in Numbers chapter 12, verse 6. We are going through the verse, but let's hear from 68 9.2 what we can understand from it according to this topic. Mhm,
To be like Jesus
mhm,
in character is
mhm,
God's
Yeah.
aim of his people.
mhm.
From the beginning, it was God's plan that members of the human family, created in his image, should develop God-like characters.
Right?
To
Mm.
accomplish this,
Mhm,
our first parents in Eden were to receive instruction from Christ and the angels in face-to-face converse.
right. Mhm,
But after Adam and Eve sinned,
mhm.
they could no longer freely speak to heavenly beings in this manner.
So there was a main object why God was
Yeah.
coming face to face to Adam. They were to
Mm-hmm.
learn how
True.
it was to be like God. They were supposed to
Okay.
learn to be like God. But all these lessons were interfered with. Why?
Mm.
Because they sinned. So after that sin, let's see what happened. But after Adam,
But after Adam and Eve sinned,
mhm,
they could no longer freely speak to the heavenly beings in this manner,
right,
so that the
Mm.
human family might not be left without guidance.
mhm,
God chose other ways to reveal his will to his people,
mhm,
one of which was the medium of prophets.
right,
To Israel,
mhm,
God explained, "If there be a prophet among you,
mhm,
I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in
mhm,
a vision and will speak unto him in a dream."
right. So
Mm.
this is Numbers chapter 12, verse 6. So
Yes.
before prophets were, the system of prophets was instituted, God was coming face to face to Adam. Why? To present lessons so that they can be transformed and be like God. But
Mm.
when they sinned, God could no longer come to them face to face. He now instituted the office of the prophet so that they are not left behind. So this office is there until we are able to see God face to face. Before we can see God face to face, we are so that we are not left behind, we should be under a prophet. So this is the ministry which was instituted by God so that he has a media to come
Mm-hmm.
near to so that he is known his will through this media of the prophet. So if you say we don't have a prophet, so you are just dangling with nothing, we are left behind. We lose actually when we don't have a prophet. We lose. Now let's hear again from um Apay Apay 52 in the New Estate 52.1,
Mm-hmm.
and we go with it until it's elaborating on many topics on many verses there. Among the last
Okay.
words of David, right?
Among the last words of David,
Mhm,
the statesman prophet,
mhm.
were these words.
So what does the name David mean?
Mm.
It was he was a statesman,
Prophet.
right? So these are the words from David. Let's hear.
The Spirit of the Lord spake by me,
Mhm.
and his word was in my tongue.
Right. So David actually says that's why he says now we are going to be under David, or somebody with the spirit of David. Why? We know David
Okay.
was a king, but also he had the
Statesman
spirit
prophet.
of prophet. All these other kings which were there, like Ahab, they needed a prophet by their side. But David would
Okay. Mm-hmm.
rule without the prophet. Why? Because he was imbued with what this king, the spirit of being a king, and as well
Yes.
as a prophet. That's why we have the
Yeah.
priest and king
Mm.
spirit. So those two were in David. Apart from other kings, they only had the spirit to rule. They were kings, but they will need a prophet like Samuel. I mean Saul. needed Samuel.
Needed Samuel.
The
Yes.
time he wanted to perform the office of Samuel of making an altar and making this sacrifice, that was his end, but not with David. David had a spirit, that's why he said a statesman prophet. One was a statesman, he was a king. Civil government came from David, as well
Yes.
as being a prophet. That's why in the last end, we was talking of a Davidic kingdom. This Davidic kingdom is a kingdom which is ruled by somebody with both spirits. The spirit of ruling as well as the spirit of prophecy. Now here, we are being told by Ape, it's our own spirit of prophecy book in the New Estate is saying, the spirit of the Lord spake by me. It's David telling us through 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 2. He had the spirit of the Lord. Now, read on, let's hear.
Among the last words of David, the statesman prophet, were these: The Spirit of the Lord spake by me,
Right?
and his word was in my tongue. He was one of the holy men of God,
Right?
who spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost.
Right. In 1 Peter chapter 1, 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 21, that's where we hear that all the holy men of God, they spake as they were moved and wrote the Bible. But we see now one of the kings had also that spirit, which was in all the people or the prophets that was the Bible. Now read on, let's hear.
When these men were moved by the Holy Spirit to speak, they gave their messages as words from God. The Bible idea of a prophet is that he is a spokesman for the Lord.
So when we have a prophet, we have God's spokesman. We have somebody who speaks on behalf of God as if it's God who has spoken. This is what we have. Now read one lesson.
In almost every instance in the Old Testament, the word prophet is translated from the Hebrew nabi. The Old Testament usage of the word gives a clearer concept of its meaning than does philology. In Exodus 7, verse 1 and 2, the thought is apparent. And the Lord said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet.
So you see, with Moses, he occupied a higher post more than, that's why when they were, Miriam and Aaron were talking against Moses, he pricked God and took them outside and explained it clearly to Miriam and Aaron, who already were prophets. And Aaron was a prophet. And he was explaining that if I have a prophet, I speak to the prophet in dreams and visions, but I don't do that with Moses. So Moses was more like a god. This is what God made him when he was moving with the Exodus. So these ones who had the spirit of prophecy, which is Aaron and Miriam, they were now treating Moses as an ordinary person. They were treating Moses as an ordinary person, like they were prophets as ordinary. They thought they were only ordinary. But now God was pricked and he gave them, especially Miriam, the leprosy plague. So
Elder, amongst
against God.
so amongst these three, Moses was the one whom God said, don't think Moses is at the same level with you. For with Moses, I speak to him face to face. And with you too, I might come in dreams. But with Moses, it's face to face.
That's why I say, when I talk about the ministry of the prophet, when we have a prophet in the church right now, we have somebody who heaven will lead and who utters what God himself is uttering. And it is your own peril, our own peril, to speak against that prophet, like it was with Miriam and Aaron. Right. So let's
So
hear more
how
about
is
this.
how is the church of our time functioning without, because we know in 1915, Sister White died in
Right.
1915, and from the church point of view, we've not seen anyone coming up as a prophet, and the church believes Sister White is still still the prophet, is still our prophet, even if she's dead. And is it possible that a church would function and still have an up-to-date information from heaven when there is no prophet? Because it looks like God has to have someone at each given time who is a connection between his people here on earth and also heaven. So we are in that dilemma where we are looking at the dead prophet and still claiming to have a prophet but a dead one. How does it?
Never did God have people with such a delusion to say a dead person to lead them. Never in any. He could have used these dead people when he was taking this exodus from Egypt. They wouldn't have
Yeah,
needed.
they've
They
used dead
wouldn't have
Abraham. Yeah,
needed Moses. They would just
Moses.
Abraham there were fairy tales from what they were hearing, what Abraham was saying. So
They could. Yeah.
how are they functioning? Of course, that's why they have policies, church policies and creeds. When
Ah.
the moment they discard this office, they have something to unite them. The only thing they want is the church policy, which stands on behalf of the prophet. But this church
Oh,
policy
so it
does not,
replaces now the prophet.
it replaces the prophet, but it works
Ah,
in antagonism with the prophet.
with the okay,
With the
okay.
prophet. You see, the
Then
spirit
that's
of
it.
prophet is saying, we tell you clearly that the church creeds work against the gift of prophecy. So, why? Because they are left behind. What they wrote in so many years ago in that policy, when the scroll is being unrolled, they're left
Unrolled. Yeah.
behind. That's why when we
Mm.
talk about the Christ being the branch from 1844, they don't know anything because the policy doesn't have
Doesn't
nothing.
accommodate that.
We
Yeah.
talk about the sealing, which is in early writing, page 15, which is God, New Jerusalem, and the glorious star containing Jesus. They know
It's
nothing about
it's
that
unheard of. Yeah.
because it's an unrolling of the scroll. They are left behind with what they wrote a donkey years ago, and they use that as a unification of everyone. If they tell you that this is not Adventism, what they mean is this is not in the church policy, though it is in the Bible. So they are so left behind what I say.
Then
To be honest, that's what it means.
dangerous
So
grounds. Then yeah.
yes, those are dangerous grounds. That's why where there is no prophet, people will perish
People perish.
without knowledge, because lack of knowledge causes you to perish. Now, the spirit of prophecy clearly says they replaced the gift of prophecy with the creeds and policies, church policies. Right. So where we were reading, which scripture is
APAY.
APAY. Have you finished it?
Yeah,
Go to the next one. Which one is it?
yeah, the next one.
Mm-hmm.
54.1.
54.1. Right. Read from there.
Another term is introduced in 1 Samuel 9, verse 9,
Right.
which is used synonymously with the Hebrew word nabi to designate a prophet. Before time in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, thus he spake, Come and let us go to the seer. For he that is now called a prophet, nabi, was before time called a seer, roer. A seer is one who perceives things that do not lie in the realm of natural sight or hearing.
Right.
Although used synonymously to indicate a person who possesses the prophetic gift, the two words illustrate basically different phases of the experience of the prophet.
Right.
Seer denotes the reception of the message from God by the prophet.
Right.
It indicates that God has opened to the view and hearing of the prophet that which is indescribable to one who does not possess the prophetic gift.
Mhm.
Similar in meaning, similar in meaning is another Old Testament word translated seer.
Mhm.
Choser is derived from a word meaning to see
Mhm.
or to behold.
Mhm.
From the
Mm.
same source comes the word for vision
Mhm.
in the sense of a divinely inspired vision.
Mhm.
Here is another indication of the fact that the prophet sees supernaturally.
Mhm.
These two words are used as synonyms in Isaiah 30, verse 10,
Mhm.
which say to the seers, roar, see not, and to the prophets, choser, prophesy not unto us right things,
Mhm.
speak unto us smooth things,
Mhm.
prophesy deceits.
Right.
Both terms generally stress the reception rather than the delivery of the message, although it is difficult at times to make any distinction.
So you see, the prophet is called seer.
Mm.
Why?
Yes. Uh-huh.
He says
Something more
says
natural.
something that people don't see.
Mm-hmm.
It might come in visions or in dreams. That dream, nobody else will have it, but the prophet will have it. The visions, that vision, nobody will have the vision. But by the way, it's also difficult to distinguish dreams and visions, especially when you are sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you might think it was a dream when it was a vision. So
Yes. Uh-huh.
it's very difficult to distinguish at times. You can distinguish it during the day, but
Okay.
sometimes you might think it's a dream, yet it is a vision. So those are the things. Let's go to the next one. Appeal 55.1.
Thus, we see that while the words give us various insights into the relationship of the prophet to God's message,
Mhm.
all the words designates the prophet in his office as spokesman for God.
So all what whether seer or chosen, they all just show that it's the prophetic office of the prophet and the relationship between the prophet and God. And then go to 65.2.
The prophets
Mhm.
were students of their own prophecies in order that they might grasp all that it was possible for them to know at the time.
Mhm.
But failure to understand a message did not excuse them from delivering it as God instructed them to.
Now, this is very important because
Mm.
the
Okay. Mm-hmm.
prophets were students
Of
of
their
their
own
own
prophecy.
On
prophecies.
prophecy.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
it means the prophecy, the prophet has got own prophecies.
Mm.
So if we say this time there is no prophet, then what are we saying? We have no person like that. Because it says own prophets in order that they might grasp all that was possible for them to know at that same time. So that's why we
Mm.
say the prophet should be a living one, not a dead one. Because each
Okay.
time there is something to be understood at that time,
Particular time. Yes.
at that
Mm-hmm.
particular. But failure, though, to understand a message, like it was with Daniel, he did not understand the message of the prophecies until the time. So he
But he
was
had to
just told,
deliver the
go thy
message.
way, you will sleep. It will be
Yes.
understood at the time of the end. But still, it did not stop Daniel delivering
From
that
delivering the
message.
message. Okay.
Yes. You deliver things that you don't understand that will happen. Like what it was with Sister White, she delivered things that are not now happening in our time.
In our time.
Those she
Yes.
didn't
Very true.
understand them. Like things like daily, she would tell you that silence is golden.
Is
That one she
golden.
didn't
Yeah.
know. She just said silence is golden.
Is golden. Mm.
And on many of the prophecies also in Revelation, she did not understand them. They are yet to be understood by the prophets of our time, the prophet of our time. If we don't have a prophet in our time, then we are dead without knowledge.
Yes, that's true.
People perish. We have to have somebody who has revelation for our time, believe it or not. Now, let's go to the next one. The next one I'm still answering that first question. What is a prophet? What does it
Yes.
do? This and that. And then 68.9, we went to it earlier on. But let's read carefully there. The work of the prophet. We want to see what is the work of the prophet. What does it include?
The work of a prophet
Mhm.
includes much more than just making predictions.
Right.
Moses, a prophet of God who wrote 6 books of the Bible, wrote very little about what was to come in the future.
You see, most people,
Mm.
especially when COVID started, most people say, "Oh, so it means we're at the end of this time. What is this coming?" You should be telling. The
Yeah, yeah.
includes much more than just making
More than
predictions.
making
Yeah.
predictions.
Moses did not even predict
Mm.
about the future. Nothing. He only wrote the laws that should be followed. He was a prophet.
Yeah.
Read on this here.
Moses, a prophet of God
Mhm.
who wrote 6 books of the Bible,
Right?
wrote very little about what was to come in the future.
Mhm.
His work is described by Hosea in its broader sense.
Mhm.
By a prophet, the
Right?
Lord brought Israel out of Egypt,
Mhm.
and by a prophet
Oh, yes.
was he preserved.
Right. So what was his job? To
Preserved.
make sure he takes Israel out of Egypt and
Preserved.
preserve Israel in the wilderness. And also by a prophet, they went into Canaan through a prophet.
Amen.
So
Yes.
that was a job. So they only needed, what do they need? What did they need in that job? They needed only to know the laws, the statutes, the judgments, the testimonies. That's all they needed.
That was it. Yeah.
That was it, to preserve
That's
them,
all.
to make them walk out of. So his prediction was to tell them what they should do tomorrow. Tomorrow, you all should put blood on your doorsteps, track this and that and that. Tomorrow, we go through Edom. While others say, no, it's nearer this side, the prophet will direct them which route to take. And when they were naughty and disapproved that route, they would find when they are far that the pillar of fire and the cloud is left behind. So, what was the job of Moses? To direct that passage through until they were in Canaan. So, you can't predict a job for all the one job to be done by all the prophets. No, it depends on what is the object
For
of
that
that
time.
prophet's calling. Right?
Yes.
So, read on this here. Mhm.
A prophet
Mhm.
is not one who is appointed by his fellow men.
That's the first thing that has made the
Mm.
prophet so vulnerable to men, because men don't witness the ordination of the prophet. And neither the prophet is not even allowed to say out that I am a prophet. If you see people saying out, well, they're still playing because you can't say out. Christ
Hey.
himself,
Yeah.
until he was crucified, they were saying, "You are the Son of God," and he will say, "You are the one who have said it. It's you saying it." He didn't say yes. He just said,
Uh-huh.
"You said it," so that they don't go about saying he said it. So it's people who were under his ministry who actually knew that Christ is the Son of God. But
Yes.
everybody
Uh-huh.
else will treat them as normal as anybody. So that's the point with the prophets. It's not like pastors who will be trained 3 years wherever institutes and given a certificate, and you see the certificate hanging on the wall, and he is also with a collar and with a big gown or whatever, you know, and people know. They know it's a pastor. But the prophet,
Yes.
you are just there within the whole multitude. Nobody guesses. So that's the
Mm.
problem. It's not Moses. That's why Pharaoh was hardened until they had 10 plagues, because he did
Wow.
not witness Moses that was a prophet. Pharaoh didn't even know that Moses was a prophet, but looking at Moses like a silly grasshopper or something that is not less that is less important. Didn't take him serious. You say yes, next day no. He said, yes. up until his firstborn died. Then he called for Moses, come out, out, out. Even still after calling him, after he took all the Israelites out of Egypt, he had to follow him until all his army died, perished in the Red Sea. He died not knowing there was a prophet in his land.
Wow.
So that's the only disadvantage with prophets. They are not known. They are not known.
So
All we know is
so
we see
Elder,
somebody active.
yeah. So Elder, the reader also read a part where it was saying a prophet is not one who is appointed by his fellow man, nor is he self-appointed. The choice of a person is to be a prophet is entirely in God's hands. So we cannot come together and vote and say, today we want this person to be a prophet, or can a president be the prophet of the movement, or can because I've seen there are many churches, they've got presidents, they've got this, and the president becomes the voice of the people instead of having a prophet. Is that
it's not biblical. If people vote, it's not, a prophet is not chosen that way. The prophet is chosen by God himself, and that privacy remains known by the prophet and God himself. The prophet, the first thing, the prophet also he should be confident of his or her office. So should be knowing whether people say this and that in her, she should have been clearly told by God her duties or his duties. Like it was with Moses. You
yes,
wouldn't
he
argue
knew.
with Moses. Moses knew exactly. He saw the burning bush and
Yes,
spoke with God there. So whether you believe it or not, but he was
that's
steadfast
what he
in his
saw.
role.
Yeah.
In what God sent him to do, he was steadfast. So nobody takes up this position without knowledge. The first knowledge is between God and the prophet, and nobody else. Like Abraham. Abraham was a friend of God who was chatting with him daily. And Lot didn't know nothing, did not witness anything, not even hear the voice of God talking to Abraham.
Nothing.
Nothing. But what made Abraham so confident? It was the revelation of knowing what he was. So even Moses, the revelation, even when Korah and Dathan were wrestling against him, you take too much to yourself. What do you think you are? Moses is the one who prescribed their death. He says, if God does something that has never been done, if he opens the earth so that you are swallowed, then you'll know I'm a prophet. It differs from Aaron, who instead dared to put the rods, 12 rods,
12 rods,
in
yeah.
temple, in the tabernacle, for them
Just to prove.
know whether God was using Aaron. So Aaron's rod budded. At least for some time, it settled their problem, where they only continued to say Aaron is not. Aaron is not. Why? Because they knew he had made a calf. He had made a mistake. He had made a calf for them to worship while Moses was in Mount Sinai.
On
So
the
they
Mount Sinai,
continued to disapprove Aaron until they had these 12 rods. For them only to see, because now they had proved Moses was, but they did not prove this other one,
Aaron, okay.
until God made the rod of Aaron bad. And settled for a while, settled the problem for a while, but they did not, they continued to disapprove the office, the prophetic office. So when I try
because
to explain to
it looks like
people,
one day Moses was right, then Moses, it just used to be like that in the wilderness. One day they believe he's a prophet, the next day it's you, Moses, it's you, Moses. So
Because when they went out of when they went out of Egypt, of course, everyone believed Moses was sent, because they saw everybody whose firstborn was alive. That what you said, that the firstborns will be dead, and they saw their firstborns were there. So everybody was singing happily, excited, going out of Egypt. But There, chaos came when they couldn't cross
In the
the Red
wilderness
Sea,
now.
and the army was pursuing after them, and there was no escape.
They
They
forgot about him
instantly
being a
forgot that
prophet.
he was a prophet. Yeah. And they said, did you see there are no grapes in Egypt? You want us to
Yeah,
die
you
here,
brought
to
us
perish without any grape?
to kill us here. Uh-huh.
So they had already stopped viewing him as a prophet. But when they saw the miracle of the dividing of the waters, they believed he was a prophet. And they marched into the Red Sea on dry ground, seeing walls of water. They marched and crossed. But as soon as they crossed, there was a miracle again to prove them. There
To
was no
prove.
water. There was no water at all in the desert. But they crossed where there were walls of water. And
So
now
can we say
God wants to prove
prophets have a
Mhm.
difficult challenge of being
It's
accepted.
one of the
They seem not
major,
to be accepted
yeah.
at any given time.
That's why he says to Ezekiel, I'm sending you to a rebellious people that will never hear you. They will never hear you. It's not you, it's God that they don't hear. So God clearly tells the prophet people will not hear. So the prophet should work knowing that the people will adamantly make him or her useless so that they
Yeah.
don't hear. So God does all that preparation.
And
So when the prophet,
I'm liking the part where you put the emphasis that him or her, because
Mhm.
according to the reader, both men and women have been used from time to time by God
Mhm.
to speak on his behalf. So
The latest one,
it's
Sister
not.
White, that we know, is not a him.
But it's funny. We know about Sister White, but we still
Mhm.
make the. I came across a video where they were trying to explain why God chose the 12 apostles, why they were men, and but forgetting that the founder, one of the founder of the church, was actually a woman. So
The problem is that in the Dark Ages, people were kept away from the Bible.
okay.
Wasn't allowed to read the Bible. So they are ignorant. And we see that thing repeating in our time. Instead, we give people some other books that we write. And
Yeah,
we
yeah.
keep them away from the spiritual prophets and the Bible. You see people, philosophers writing this thing,
They are busy,
these
right?
books,
Yes,
giving
yes.
people something that they won't go home saying, I've read anything, so that they're
Mm.
kept ignorant. So when they're ignorant, look at what comes up. They come up and say women are not supposed to be working, women, but they forget the founder of the denomination is a woman.
A woman.
Mhm.
Right.
It's
Yes, yes.
mostly ignorance.
Yeah.
It's ignorance.
And not wanting to admit. Mhm.
Well, it's ignorance, and sometimes more to culture, really, traditions, and
Okay.
some traditions
Traditional,
that look
yeah.
down on women. But the world is far advanced in that
Yeah,
part of the world. You can
it
see
has
the
gone.
women driving buses, lorries driven by
Yeah.
men,
Things that you
pilots.
never think they would
The
do.
women
Yeah.
are pilots. Yeah, you can see the world is far advanced. There is not such
Mm.
job as for women or as for men only. It's for both. The world is far advanced, but we are making ourselves so dumb so that God cannot use us. And here, read on.
Mhm.
He says, a prophet is not one who is appointed by his fellow men. Right, read on.
A prophet is not one who is appointed by his fellow men, nor is he self-appointed.
Mhm.
The,
Mm.
the choice of a person to be a prophet is entirely in the hands of God.
That's
But
why sometimes when the prophet is appointed by God, people try to blame and say this one is self-styled, is self-styling. Why? Because they have no witness. They have not witnessed where the
Oh,
prophet
yes.
was appointed. So they think it was a self-style or something, like it was when God appointed David. It was the family only which knew, but the rest of people were not there. That thing occurred in a family, in a house. and not in a public dominion. So this is what happens. God tries to conceal the prophet so that you don't witness that this one has been appointed as a prophet. Why? Because we should be tested by a message, but not by who is carrying it. Not by the messenger, but by the message. Because normally people are bound to say, who preached about this? Who said so? So it means most of the time we allow ourselves to be tested by the messenger instead of being tested by the message. It's the message that should test us. That's what God will consider. If we know that so and so is a prophet, he would have lots of false people who pretend to be worshiping God, who pretend to like God when they don't. So he tests them with messages of people that they don't think of, so that perchance God might select properly those who really hear the sound of his voice. Now read on.
Right? Yes.
Read on.
Both men and women have from time to time been chosen by God to speak for him.
Men and women, there's no gender issue with God. He created men and women. I don't know where we come about with these gender issues.
With these issues, yeah.
They are not led by the Spirit of God. Because the
That's very true.
clearly says
both men and women.
These
yeah,
prophets,
I heard someone saying, can a female be an elder? And it looks like we are still very far from understanding how God works.
An elder is just a title.
Yeah.
It's a title on a person. The prophet, we have said, can be a pastor, can be a teacher. So what is an elder as compared to pastor? And as compared to other things? The prophet is even higher.
Higher ranked, yes.
And then you ask about being an elder.
And what about a prophet? You see.
What about a prophet then? It's higher than all those.
Yeah. Okay, yes, yeah.
These prophets, these men and women chosen of God as channels of communication have spoken and written what God has revealed to them in holy vision. The precious word of God comprises these messages. Through these prophets, members of the human family have been led to an understanding of the conflict that goes on for the souls of men, the conflict between Christ and his angels and Satan and his angels.
Right. So you see there is a conflict already happening between Christ and the devil. And these devils, angels, Christ, angels. But through the prophets, members of the human family have been led to understand what is going on time after time. So if we say we have no prophet, so who is making us understand what is happening right now on those things, issues that involve us? There is conflict going on non-stop until we reach the end. So that's why we need the prophet to be there. Right, read on.
We are led to an understanding of this conflict in Earth's closing days and of the means provided by God to care for his work and to perfect the characters of his people.
So in the closing way, that's why we need a strong prophet to let us know about this conflict, which is more marked in our time. So how can we say this is the time when we don't have a prophet? You can see this is a delusion. And read on again on 68:14.
God,
14:3, yeah.
God who?
Right, God who?
God, who at sundry times and in diverse manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets.
Right. We have read this book, Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1. For instance, I found another brethren preaching about Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1, saying, at sundry times you are speaking to prophets, now you speak to us through the Son of God. I could see clearly that the brethren didn't even comprehend what he was talking about. Now we should understand that one in detail today. Right. Mm-hmm.
The light was imparted to the prophet through visions,
Mm-hmm.
but the prophet did not write while in vision.
Mm-hmm.
His work was not a mechanical task.
Right.
Except on rare occasions,
Mm-hmm.
the Lord did not give him the very words to speak,
Mm-hmm.
nor did the angel guide the hand of the prophet in the precise words to record.
Mm-hmm.
From the mind enlightened by visions,
Mm-hmm.
the prophet spoke or wrote the words that would convey the light and instruction to his audience,
Mm-hmm.
whether they read the message or heard it orally.
Mm-hmm.
We might ask how the mind of the prophet was enlightened.
Right. So we are still talking about how the prophet the prophet was in vision, but when he came out of vision, he wrote what he saw with his own own words.
Yes.
So it means the
Mm-hmm.
prophet also gave his own words to describe what he was told or shown. Right. We will know more about
Okay.
Hebrews
Uh-huh.
1 verse 1, but in clearly, just briefly, because it's there, the explanation more about it is there. Because that's why we find
Is
maybe
the
some people talk about all the prophets prophesied until John. Now, what?
until John? Yeah.
Yes, so some mean that after John, there is no more prophets in the New Testament. It's the same as this Hebrews 1 verse 1, where they think in this New
Uh-huh.
Testament now is Christ, no more prophets. But what it clearly means, as we are going to study, it clearly means that
Uh-huh.
in the past, God spoke directly to the prophets in vision while they will write, right? All what we have
Uh-huh.
now in the
Yes.
prophets of the New Testament is to relate to what God showed to Jeremiah, what God showed to Daniel. We are relating to the prophets, to the Old Testament prophets. While the New Testament prophets are not relating to their own mission, they are relating, they are
Okay.
interpreting what the old prophets, the prophets, the old prophets wrote. This is exactly what it means. He spoke to the Old Testament prophets,
Yes.
direct,
Uh-huh.
giving them visions of what will happen in our time. So in our
In
time,
our time,
we
yes. Uh-huh.
use what he said to Isaiah, what he said to Moses,
What he
and
says. Uh-huh.
interpret it in our time. This is exactly what it means. But in both
Mm.
testaments, they are prophets. One, the first prophets were the ones being related to what is it. Like, for instance, for example, Sister White. Sister White was
Yes.
raised
Uh-huh.
not to write anything of her own, but was writing what
Mm.
the previous prophets wrote. Like when you go to Patrick's and Prophets talking about the Old Testament, the statutes and laws, what the Patrick's were ahead
Referring to
in the
other
Old
prophets.
prophecies, referring to what other prophets
Yes. Uh-huh.
wrote. So we can learn the whole Bible through Sister White. But what is she writing? What other prophets wrote?
Oh, what other prophets wrote about?
Yes,
Yes.
she's
Uh-huh.
elaborating, she's interpreting what other prophets have written. This is what she's writing.
Mm.
So she's not writing anything fresh. She's interpreting what has been written before.
She's actually
She's
yes,
interpreting
yes,
what
yes.
has been written before. So there is no new Bible in her time. But she's interpreting what the whole
Mm.
Bible has, the prophecies who are writing the
Has
Bible,
been
has
talking
been
about.
written
Yeah.
before. That's what she is doing to us. So that's what the New Testament
Mm.
prophets do. They interpret what the Old Testament prophet wrote.
Mm.
Now, here
Right. Yeah.
we will
Uh-huh.
understand it more fully when we come to it. Now, we might also listen.
Mm-hmm.
Where you, where you went,
Okay.
where you live.
From the mind enlightened by visions,
Mm-hmm.
the prophet spoke or wrote the words that will convey the light and instruction to his audience,
Mm-hmm.
whether they read the message or heard it orally.
Mm-hmm.
We might ask how the mind of the prophet was enlightened.
Mm-hmm.
How did he gain the information and instruction he was to impart to the people?
So how did the prophet or
Mm.
Jeremiah or Daniel, how did he get what he was writing in the book? This is the question, right?
Yes.
Just as no one rule can be established for the giving of the visions, so no one rule can be established governing the way the prophet received the inspired message. In each case, however, it was a very vivid experience that made an indelible impression on the mind of the prophet. And just as that which we see and experience makes a much deeper impression on our minds than what we only hear, so the representation of the prophets, where they seemed to witness dramatic events, made deep and lasting impressions on their minds.
So how were the prophets inspired? Sometimes you come with a problem, and before the prophet answers, something goes in the mind of the prophet that has happened before. So who is working there? The Spirit of God. While you are letting your
God,
trial,
yes.
what is the Spirit of God doing?
God is
reminding you what happened
working in
to
the mind
such
of
an incident. So the prophet will come up with the answer why it came up from a lasting impression of what it happened before.
okay.
So, but who brought that impression is the Holy Spirit. So
Is
when
the Holy Spirit.
They were writing exactly from lasting impressions. And God was reminding them what was happening here and there in order to come up with an idea. This is what happened.
Wow.
For instance, somebody will say, is it okay to marry an unbeliever? The prophet will have somebody who did that before and
Previously,
had a
yes.
bad experience. So the prophet will say, no, it is not right. Why?
It's not right.
To remind the prophet of what has happened before. This is what happened. That's how the prophet works. That's how the Spirit of God inspires the prophet. Now, read on, let's hear.
Mrs. White wrote once,
Right?
my attention is often directed to scenes transpiring upon earth.
So you see, the Spirit of God will take her mind to scenes that have been happening. So it says often directed to scenes. This is how she wrote most of the books. There were scenes reminded to her by the Spirit of God in order to come up with something to write. And then
at times, I am carried far ahead into the future and shown what is to take place. Then again,
at times when she's thinking, she thinks ahead of what will happen. And what?
Then again, I am shown things as they have occurred in the past.
When she's thinking of what will happen in the future, she is shown what happened in the past. She comes up with a solution. This is how the Spirit of God inspired him. Now, this one was CCH 15.1. Right, let's go to elaborating more on Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 11 to 14. Arche 25.1.
Prophets kept men constantly aware of God's instruction to them. They must never entertain the idea that they have no access to divine counsel. A prophet among them would be a continual reminder of the nearness and availability of all the instruction they need.
Right.
This was emphasized by the Lord in Deuteronomy 30, verse 11 to 14.
Right. So people will come maybe with problems. Some will say, okay, I have a problem. I have this and that happening around me, or I have a problem at work, or I have a problem of this and that. So what will happen is, because there's something that was similar to that happened, and they ask the guidance of God, they pray knowing God is going to intervene, because he did intervene on such a thing there. And I've heard so many people come saying they want prayers for such a thing. And because the prayers are answered, that inspires them more to say, we have to go back, there's this, then that, and that. So this is how Sister White was making counsels to young writers, counsels to children, to mothers, to fathers, counsels. This counsel, God will make sure what she has counseled will be accurately, will occur as accurate as possible, so that it gives the people the confidence of people who live with a prophet. Now, let's hear where he says in page 25.2, right? What was true of times?
What was true of times when a prophet was personally among God's people is also true of those who have access to the written testimony of the prophets in the Bible.
Right.
Counsel is always available and is never far off.
Anyone with a Bible can find counsel in the Bible. And
Counsel is
true
yes,
that
it's never far.
True. It's true also when somebody has a person who is a prophet. Instead of referring to the Bible, can easily refer to the person. And if that person is a prophet, will give you a counsel, which even if you're going to read it in the Bible, you find the counsel is there.
You find the same counsel, yes.
So it's just the same. If you have somebody led by the Bible, or if you have somebody led by the Bible, you are still the same as that one led by the Bible. And those led by the prophet are more at an advantage because they have current news of the utterances of God. They have current news. So for Lot, he had no Bible, but referred to Abraham. Abraham would tell Lot what God wants. So he surpassed those with the Bible. Because sometimes they read the Bible, they don't understand. They don't even, confide in the Bible. They doubt it. But if they have a prophet who will utter exactly what God is saying to them at that moment, that's the difference. Right, read on.
Through the prophets.
What was true? Repeat that one.
What was true of times when a prophet was personally among God's people is also true of those who have access to the written testimony of the prophets in the Bible.
So that's why even in the end, those with the prophet are much better.
Yes.
More than those with only a Bible with no prophet. Why? Because they've carried utterances from God. Because the prophet is connected. It's a live one.
Okay.
Yes. Connected to the earth, connected to heaven and earth. The connection is the prophet. Now, through the
prophets, God could maintain direct connection with the people without talking with them face to face. Visions and dreams served the same purposes as with face-to-face conversation. In vision, the prophet could be taken into the very presence of the Lord.
Right. So you see, it's important. If we say we have no prophet, we are losing a very big privilege. And it's a privilege to have somebody in connection, in direct contact with heaven. Now, read also in CET. 250.2, it's elaborating on Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 21. One of the divinely appointed tests.
One of the divinely appointed tests of a true prophet of God is the accurate fulfillment of his words.
One test is when we have a prophet,
there should be
there should be an accurate fulfillment of what the prophet has said. That's one of the divinely appointed tests. If somebody says it's going to rain when it is in deep winter, when there is dry nothing, and it does so, like it was
Yes.
with Joshua, he said, "Let the sun not set, not go down," and the sun didn't. So that's a divinely appointed test of a true
Yes.
prophet. When something happens, it's divinely appointed.
Appointed when it comes to pass.
Right. Let's hear
Mhm.
to ancient Israel.
To ancient Israel,
Mhm.
God said through Moses,
Mhm.
himself a mighty prophet,
Right?
if thou say in thine heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord hath not spoken?
Mhm.
When a prophet speaketh in the name of the Lord, if the thing follow not, nor come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord hath not spoken.
Mhm.
But the prophet hath spoken it presumptuously.
Right?
Thou shalt not be afraid of him.
Right. When somebody speaks of something
Mm.
and that occurs,
Yeah.
that
Uh-huh.
person is not a prophet.
You
Yes,
should
or
not be
that
scared
thing
of him.
presumptuously. It's not possible. But when, that's why
Mm.
you see even the word saying, what so and so said, it came true. Then it pricks them. But when they say, what so and so spoke, it didn't come
It
true,
it
they are
never.
nullifying that person. It's no longer a prophet.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Yeah.
we have now to see this distinction between prophets and pastors. So we are really worried because we see the pastors wanting to take the role of the prophet. But let's see the distinction between the prophet and the pastor.
Yes. Yeah.
Now
I
we will
think that's
read
very important.
for
Yeah.
this. Yeah, we will read from the New Estate PFF 4 space 964.3.
Through past ages,
Mhm.
God had often spoken through men whom he inspired with divine messages.
Mhm.
The call to the prophetic office came not by human appointment, but from God, and it came with convincing power and authority directly to the individual chosen.
Right. So the calling came direct to
Directly
the person who is being
to the
chosen,
person.
not
Mm.
everybody,
No.
right?
Mm. Mm.
Because
Mm.
that's what we wrote. We read from Hebrews 5, verse 4. If you are on your own, it came direct to the person, the messenger.
The messenger
Mhm.
was in earlier times called a seer,
We find that in First Samuel 9, verse 9, right?
one who sees things beyond natural sight,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
often in a vision or a dream from
Right?
God.
So it's either it's
Uh,
a dream or it's a vision. So if today you say I've dreamt such a thing, people say, "Oh, you were too full when you slept. You were too full of." But God speaks to prophets through dreams. Speaks
that's true.
to, to prophets through dreams, not visions always, right? And
Mm.
sometimes,
And sometimes,
mhm,
sometimes he was designated as a messenger,
like we find in Second Chronicles 36, verse 15, that's a messenger.
and
Mhm.
sometimes a watchman,
Like it is in Ezekiel 3, verse 17.
but more often he was called a prophet, not merely of a foreteller,
Mhm,
as we generally use the word today,
mhm,
but a foreteller or a foreteller, a
mhm.
spokesman for God.
Not a foreteller,
But a
F
fourth,
F O R E, but a fourth teller. If we say fourth, we mean
Mm.
a teller of what God wants us to know today, not yesterday.
Okay. Uh-huh.
What do we want to know today? Who is going to tell us about what He has uttered today? For if you send us to Sister White, God uttered in her time, but we want what is uttered in our time. So we want a
Mm.
prophet who is a foreteller,
mm,
not a foreteller, but a foreteller. So we have two things: foretelling the future and foretelling what today God is saying about us. But
Okay.
read on.
Mm-hmm.
But more often.
yeah. These prophets, called from all walks of life,
Mhm,
were moral and religious teachers.
mhm,
They were often reformers and counselors and spiritual guides, as well as predictors of immediate or distant future events.
You see, when I say they can do all the jobs, they can be teachers, they can be counselors, they can be pastors, they can be anything, right?
Some, like Elisha,
Mm.
worked miracles. Others, like John the Baptist, did not.
Right?
But moved of God, they all delivered messages from God, not their own. To Hosea, God said, I have also spoken by the prophets, and have multiplied visions, and used similitudes by the ministry of the prophets.
Right?
Thus the purposes of God may be revealed to the prophet by vision, dream, oral communication, or otherwise.
Right. So this is from PFF for space 964.3 in the New Estate. Now let's hear again on PTUK, New Estate again, July 2,
Yes.
1891, page 206.8. Right? If you have the New Estate, you should read. You should be having that, those New Estates, yellow and white Estates.
Perhaps there are
Yes.
few who realize how well fitted the apostle was for this task.
So that's why you see now how well fitted the apostle was for these tasks. So the apostle was topmost, so could do all these tasks.
All these
Because
things.
he was
Yes.
topmost. He was
Yeah.
well senior to all these other gifts, the apostles. Right?
There is not one of the spiritual gifts that he did not possess.
Right. So that's why Paul was an apostle. Why? Because he could be a pastor. He could be all those spiritual gifts because he was topmost. That's why Christ, when he came, he chose apostles. They were more than pastors. They were more than teachers. They're more than prophets. Right?
In the book of Acts, we learn of his power to work miracles,
Right?
to heal, and to discern spirits. His own writings give evidence of the spirit of prophecy that he possessed. And he says that he spoke with the tongues more than all the rest,
Right?
and that he
Yes.
would not speak without interpreting.
Right. In 1 Corinthians 14, verse 18,
Yes.
that's what it says.
He was an apostle, a prophet, an evangelist,
You
a
see what
pastor.
he was an apostle. This is in PTUK. It says he was an apostle,
A prophet, an evangelist, a pastor, and a teacher.
all those. That's why I say the other side, the other way around. If you're a prophet, you are more than a pastor. You are more than an
So,
evangelist.
so it looks like the prophet could hold any positions of those that are below. So they could
That's why
be
if you
evangelists.
say, yes, if you say there is no women ordination, Sister White was a prophet. So if she was a prophet, she was everything.
She was
She
everything.
can do
Yeah.
the pastor job. So because of ignorance, people think since she was a prophet, she was not a pastor. She was a pastor. She was everything.
Ah.
Like it was with Paul.
So
Paul
it's
was
because
an
people.
apostle, was
So it's
everything,
because
but
we
these are lesser offices than her
offices done. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's because we don't read deep. We think a pastor can only be a male and an elder can only be a male. But if you read what you have read from PTUK, whoever holds the office of a prophet can be anything. Can be a pastor,
All
can be an
those are
evangelist, can be
junior
a
apostles.
teacher.
All those below are junior to her.
Wow.
Right?
No, this is interesting. Yes.
It's fascinating. If any wish.
If any wish to know why he should be so highly favored above other men, we can only say that the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. And Paul had such singleness of purpose, such whole-souled devotion, that he used to the utmost every gift bestowed upon him. God gives to every man all that he can and will use to his glory.
Right. That was PTUK July 2, 1891, page 206. if you want to research that one. So a
Yes.
prophet or an apostle fulfills all the spiritual gifts, yeah, but a pastor cannot. That's why I
Yeah,
say it's
that's
the reverse. You
yeah,
can't train to be a pastor and be a prophet, but a prophet is appointed by God, can be
can be all these. Yes.
all the gifts. Right. Let's go to 3SG. We mentioned that one. We mentioned that one. We don't need to
Yes,
dwell
I think
on it.
we read 3SG. Yes.
Yes. So we saw on Zacharias thing, we have learned that before on Zacharias, um, Zechariah chapter 4, when it tells us about the bowl, which is the spirit of prophecy, and the the pipes that take oil from the spirit of prophecy, bowl enlightening the church. Only simply means that the pastors are to receive orders from the prophet. That's what they should. But when they start to accept that post and think they are now prophets, then alas be the church.
So
Because
if
they're taking the wrong, which is not theirs.
so if one is a pastor, should they, according to this hierarchy, they should know that above them there are apostles and
This is
prophets,
what God set up. That's how
and
God
for
set it up.
and for a pastor to function, there should be also a prophet or an apostle, because as what we have read and what you have been pulling from the spirit of prophecy and the Bible, the seer, the prophet is the one who gets information from God. And now we are seeing the pastors coming in, and you're talking of the candlesticks, that they get the information from the prophet or the apostle. Am I right to say that?
Yeah, what it clearly says is that the gift of prophets was there to unite the church. Let's read there from 3SG 29.1.
Okay.
The gifts have been superseded in the popular churches by human creeds.
3SG page 29.1. The gifts have been superseded by popular churches, by human creeds. So that church policy was put because they could not perform, they could not conduct the work without the prophet. So instead of going to the prophet, they made creeds.
Okay.
Why? It's proof enough they can't conduct themselves without those and without the prophet.
So they
So
have to come up with
but
something.
the creeds cannot replace the prophet.
Not, yeah.
So they need somewhere to refer their practice, but instead they are referring their practice from the church policy instead of referring their practice from the prophet, like it was when Sister White started. Now
Okay.
read on, let's hear.
The gifts have been superseded in the popular churches by human creeds.
Right?
The object of the gifts, as stated by Paul, was for the perfecting of the saints,
One,
for the work of the ministry,
two,
for the edifying of the body of Christ,
right?
till we all
Yes.
come in the unity of faith.
That's the reason why the prophet is supposed to be there.
Mm.
But instead they took the prophet out and they made the creed.
Oh, and
Now,
replace the prophet.
yeah, let's find it in 1 BIO 454.1 from the SOP.
Now
Now,
I take the ground that creeds stand in direct opposition to the gifts.
that's the problem. Once the creeds are there, they stand in direct opposition to the gift of
With
prophecy.
hey,
They fight the prophet, right? And
We get up a creed stating just what we shall believe on this point and on the other, and just what we shall do in reference to this thing, and say that we will believe the gifts
so
too.
that's why when the prophet comes and say you keep the feast, they go to the creed. The creed says no, it's not there. It's nowhere in the policy. So you see the policy and the prophet, they are in
they're
they work
at
against.
loggerheads.
Yeah, because the prophet will bring something new. which the creeds did not have.
No, yeah, that's very true.
So that's the
And
term now. It says the creed work against the gift.
mm,
Why? Because
so the
whatever is new, which is in the Bible and the spirit of prophecy, but the church creed does not have it.
so
So it is in direct opposition.
in a scenario where maybe the church has got a prophet, and then the prophet says, according to what God is saying, Christ has a new name in our time, and the creeds do not allow, have no space for that. So there will be commotion between the creeds and
yeah, they know exactly there is a sealing process. The seal has got to be the message of the seal has got to be taught by the prophet.
okay.
But they did not renew the creeds. Now,
The
if
creeds are
God
far
will send a
behind.
message, it will send a message through a prophet. The creed don't have it. The church policies don't have that message. Because even the prophet does not need to write those creeds. The prophet only needs to show the church what God says forth. Not foretell, but forth. Not last time, but today.
Today, what is
But
applicable to
does
us
the
right
creed
now?
have it? The creed doesn't have it. Because the prophet doesn't write the creed. You don't need to write it because the Bible is there. You don't need to write it because the spirit of prophecy is already there. And the prophet will not be relating anything from God via the creed. No. No. So this is what makes the church slag behind, covered by the
Okay.
creed, and then the prophet moves with those who are willing.
Wow. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The creed on 1 BIO 454. That's why you find those who listen to the prophet and compare what the creed is saying. They are confused and end up saying, goodbye, I'll follow what is in the Bible.
I'll follow what is in the Bible. Yes.
Unless those who are corrupted will follow what people say. But if they want to follow what God says, you will not need a creed. You will need
You
the
will not
Bible
need creeds.
and the SOP.
And
That's it.
and the living spirit of prophecy.
That's it. Right. Read on here 454.2.
But suppose the Lord, through the gifts, should give us some new light that did not harmonize with our creed. Then, if we remain true to the gifts, it knocks our creed all over at once.
That's it. That's why the feast are knocking down. Because they don't have them.
Yeah.
The new light coming from God
will knock everything.
Yes, take them off. You have to listen to the voice of God, not the creed. And
making a creed is setting the stakes.
Yeah, that's what you say. When you write a creed, you're setting it a stake. But this is what we believe come out to make. We won't take anything new. You're setting a stake. And barring.
Making a creed is setting the stakes and barring up the way to all future advancement.
You have stopped all future advancement with messages from God. So you have told God after to say, stop telling us anymore. Because we've made our creed and we've set our step. We won't be moved. And
God put the gifts into the church for a good and great object, but men who have got up their churches have shut up the way or have marked out a course for the Almighty. They say virtually that the Lord must not do anything further than what has been marked out in the creed.
So they are actually telling God, no more messages.
No more messages.
Is enough. That's what they say. So they stop advancing. And
a creed and the gifts thus stand in direct opposition to each other.
What is this church is something which is in direct opposition.
Opposition.
Yeah, because the prophet will continue uttering from God, but the creed doesn't have what the prophet is uttering. So it's in direct opposition. Right? Now, what is our position?
Now, what is our position as a people?
Mhm.
The Bible is our
Right.
creed.
Yes.
As a people, what we need to do, go back to the Bible. Back
Yes.
to the Bible. Leave these creeds. Go back to the Bible if you want to be saved.
The Bible is our creed.
Right.
We reject everything in the form of a human creed.
Anything written by any human as a creed or as a church policy, we reject if we want to be saved. This is what this quotation says. And what?
We take the Bible and the gifts of the Spirit, embracing the faith that thus the Lord will teach us from time to time.
Instead of coming to ask people, have you read the pamphlet? You should come and say, have you read the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy? That's what we should be doing if we want to be saved. All those things that are human written should be discarded. This is what we get from 1 BIO 454.2 and 1 BIO 454.3. If we are correct to follow what the Spirit of prophecy says. Let's go again to Archaic 0.3 and 154.1.
Through the years, when the kings reigned, the prophets did not occupy the same positions of authority as they had previously.
Right.
Their role was that of counselor more than of leader,
Right.
except as leadership was shown in spiritual activities. For more than 400 years after the beginning of the monarchy, the quality of kings shifted back and forth from good to evil, and prophets were used to cooperate with the worthy rulers, or to rebuke and correct those who were going in sinful ways.
Right. Right. Read on for GVA from the New Estate. GVE GW 49.2 and 49.4. Let's hear them.
John Zebedee adds concerning his Baptist namesake, John did no miracle.
You remember John, the last prophet? He did not do any miracle. Did he do any miracle? No.
No.
But let's hear.
I don't.
You can find that in John 10, verse 41. He did not do any miracle. And John the Baptist.
And John the Baptist wrote not one verse of the New Testament.
Did he write any book?
No.
No, not one.
Not that we know of. Yeah.
Yet Jesus said he was the greatest prophet indeed, even more than a prophet. Obviously, Jesus viewed the role of a prophet much more differently than most Bible-believing Christians.
So there are people who say, if there is a prophet, where are the writings? They forget one thing. John is fulfilling partially the role of Elijah, the prophet. But the fullest role of Elijah, the prophet, is in the last days with us. The prophet won't write nothing. The prophet will be just like John, no miracle, no writing anything. The prophet will only use what other prophets have written.
Have already used. Yeah.
Right. So we have William Miller, we have Sister White, we have V.T. Hotef, we have Ben Roden. They've written. But Elijah will fulfill the role of John the Baptist. Wrote nothing. He was only a forerunner for the coming of Christ in his time. And our Elijah of the day is only a forerunner, using all these writings from other prophets, making them simpler for people to understand. Forerunning before Christ comes, like John the Baptist. Right, read on, let's see. John the Baptist.
John the Baptist was principally a public proclaimer.
He was only a proclaimer. So when we have Elijah of the day, it's just going to be a public proclaimer of the coming of Christ, of the kingdom.
No predictions of the future are attributed to him.
Mhm.
Moses was chiefly an administrator,
Mhm.
a lawgiver,
Right.
a
That's why he
leader.
wrote the law, commandments, statutes, ordinances,
Yes.
everything. He was only a law administrator, a
An
lawgiver.
administrator, a
Mhm.
lawgiver, a
Mhm.
leader.
Mhm.
Prediction forms an almost insignificant part of his Pentateuch.
Mhm.
Really, there are only a couple messianic prophecies attributed to him.
Mhm.
The Apostle Paul was a theologian and a missionary.
Mhm.
He wrote more than half of the New Testament,
Right.
but
Mm.
few miracles are credited to his name,
Mhm.
and not very much is found in his writings with regard to predictions.
Right.
Mm. Okay.
Amid, let's go to this book. It's a bit complicated. E.G. White, EHC 2.8. Amid syncretists.
Amid syncretists
Mhm.
and multifaceted
Pressure.
pressures to
Mhm.
pledge allegiance to theologian scientific pluralism,
Mhm.
Ellen White's voice can still be heard,
Mhm.
calling this movement to a unity based on the enduring principles of the Word of God.
Right. So
Mm.
I don't know whether there is any more I can answer to that question. You say, what is a prophet? I've given a more elaborate answer. And
Yeah.
that more elaborate answer, Pastor,
Yes.
those going to be saved, they will be saved.
That's very true, and we have covered quite a lot in trying to
Quite a
explain
lot.
what
Though
a prophet.
I don't mind Pastor coming back to elaborate more on questions about prophets.
Yes, because yes, I think on the issue of prophets, I still have a lot of questions to ask. Now that we know the role of a prophet, and you have differentiated between a prophet and a pastor, and what a prophet or an apostle can do, and what the pastors are there to do. I think we now need to go deeper again into this subject so that we can find out more about this prophet, because I think the Bible says in the time of the end, right, God is going to send an Elijah, right, to restore everything. So I think it's very important for all believers to understand what a prophet is and what we should expect in these last days. So I think we have covered a lot in terms of the prophet. So yeah, I don't know. I think we can end here for today. But just to go through what we have received this evening, it's quite interesting that we also touched and saw that prophets can also be male and female. It's not only males only who can occupy the position of a prophet, and it's easy for many people to think that it's men only. Yet, Sister White, the founder of the church, was also a woman. So the last prophet many people say was the last prophet was actually a woman, and also the founder of the church, which is led and dominated by men, was actually a woman, and God used a woman to communicate to many people. So maybe to our viewers, this is what we have, and this is what Elder Mashiri has explained to us about the prophet among us. And we are going to come back again next week to go deeper into this issue. For many people are talking about these prophets. Some say we've got self-established prophets, Facebook prophets, WhatsApp prophets, and so forth. But we want to find out, is there a real prophet in our time whom God is going to communicate with to divulge information and secrets to his people. So thank you very much and blessed Sabbath, Elder. I don't know what you might want to say before we close tonight.
I just want to say it's the job for everybody who's going to be saved to look for a prophet of the hour.
Mm.
Otherwise, you can't remain hanging like a butterfly, no direction, no direction of where you are going, because the prophets are inspired by God to give us instructions of how we should conduct ourselves and prepare for the soon coming. God bless you and blessed Sabbath.
Thank you very much and blessed Sabbath to you. So, to all our viewers, may God bless you and thank you for coming again to our Friday night question and answer, where we will continue to look into different subjects that have something to do with our salvation. One might say, what does a prophet have to do with our salvation? The first was read by a prophet. The children of Israel were preserved and they were taken out of Egypt. So if we are going to come out of spiritual Egypt, out of Babylon, definitely we would need a prophet to be able to come out of that situation. For God says he will divulge his information only to the prophets. So yes, we will go deeper. It has something to do with our salvation. Blessed night and blessed night to everyone. We'll see you again tomorrow morning at 9:30 live here on BSM TV. We'll be continuing with all these biblical subjects and finding out what we have to do for us to be saved. Blessed evening. Thank you.